I was exactly halfway through untangling a massive billing pipeline that had not functioned properly since late 2015 when the door to my office swung open. Daniel, the CEO of the company, leaned into the doorway. He was drenched in some expensive cologne that smelled like desperate ambition, wearing a smug expression that he typically reserved for board meetings. He did not bother to knock. He just stood there, looking around my workspace as if he were inspecting a piece of real estate he had just acquired. "Hey, Richard, quick thing," Daniel said, his voice carrying that faux casual tone that always meant bad news. "Chloe starts on Monday. She is going to need your office." He dropped the statement on me without any warning, like a wet bag of trash on my desk. Chloe was his daughter. She was fresh out of some expensive private university with a degree in digital media and a minor in spending her father's money. I had seen her Instagram before. It was an endless stream of brunch mimosas, duck lips, and luxury vacations paid for by the very company I had been keeping afloat for the last 11 years. I sat there, a stack of system diagnostic reports still in my hand, feeling my brain short-circuit from the sheer absurdity of the situation. I am 58 years old. I had been with this company for over a decade. In all that time, I had never caused a scandal, never taken unnecessary sick days, and never involved myself in office drama. I was the guy who provided silent fixes, ran red-eye reports, and possessed the kind of institutional knowledge you simply do not find in an employee handbook. I was the duct tape holding the entire back end of the company together. And now, the same entitled kid who once asked me if our database had an undo button for real life was going to take my chair, my desk, and my office. I could already picture her hanging fairy lights from my whiteboard and turning the space into a college dorm room. I looked at Daniel. I did not yell. I did not throw my keyboard. I simply smiled. "Of course," I said. That was it. Just those two words. I meant them with the exact same enthusiasm and warmth you might reserve for a root canal or food poisoning. But Daniel did not notice. He never noticed anything that did not directly benefit him. He just nodded, as if I had done him a massive favor, and sauntered off down the hallway to probably polish his LinkedIn summary, or engage in whatever corporate posturing he had planned for the afternoon. I sat in that chair, my chair, for another 45 minutes. I did not type a single line of code. I did not answer any emails. I just stared at the blank wall in front of me. 11 years of my life had been quietly and methodically stacked into this small room. My sticky notes covering the monitors, the broken chair mechanism that only I knew how to tilt just right, the small potted plant in the corner that nobody else ever bothered to water. There was a worn spot on the carpet right behind the desk where I used to pace back and forth during late-night system deployments. In one lazy, thoughtless decision, all of that was being reassigned to nepotism wrapped in designer clothes. You might be wondering why I did not fight back right then and there. Why did I not march into Daniel's pristine glass office and demand respect? Why did I not bring up the Warner Act, 29 U.S.C. Section 2101, or threaten to walk out immediately? Because I had already fought those battles metaphorically every single day for the past decade. I had done my job quietly, professionally, and efficiently, and I was completely exhausted. I was not angry. I was not even sad. I was just entirely and absolutely done. So I began to pack. I did not need a large cardboard box. I only took 3 things that actually mattered. First, my ceramic coffee mug with the small chip on the rim. Second, my thick hardbound notebook containing a decade of handwritten disaster protocols, system passwords, and workaround codes. Third, a small black flash drive that held all the custom scripts and automation triggers I had built to keep the company's servers from crashing during the end-of-quarter rush. I left everything else. I left the second monitor, the expensive ergonomic mouse, and the small basket of assorted tea bags. Let Chloe figure out which tea gives you energy and which one puts you to sleep. Before I walked out the door for what Daniel assumed would be a temporary remote work arrangement, I took a quick photo of the office. It was not for nostalgia. I wanted a record of how I left it. The sun was hitting the desk perfectly, casting a long shadow across the floor that I used to mop myself whenever the company decided to cut back on janitorial services to save a few bucks. I stood there for a brief moment holding my chipped mug, drinking the last sip of black coffee. There was no grand exit. Nobody asked where the magic lived or how the massive data messes clean themselves up every month. They were just happy the problems vanished. I shut the door behind me softly. It was not a slam. It was not a dramatic statement. It was just the sound of finality. I walked past the reception desk as if I were just heading out for an early lunch. Nobody noticed my departure. That was the whole point of my career. I had built a professional life on being completely invisible. The kind of vital presence that only becomes obvious once it is gone, like the quiet hum of a refrigerator or the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. You only realize how much it matters when it suddenly stops. Once I was in my car, sitting in the parking lot with the engine running, I pulled out my phone. I drafted a very brief, polite message to Sarah in Human Resources. Hi Sarah, just a heads up. I will be transitioning to remote work temporarily while the office reshuffle is completed. I will be available via email as always. There was no emotional language. There was no signature flourish. It was as clean and sterile as a breakup text sent from a driveway. I hit send and watched the delivery confirmation appear. Then, I turned my phone off completely. I did not log into the company messaging system. I did not set up an out-of-office auto-reply. I simply evaporated into the background, ready to watch the entire operation slowly grind to a halt. Monday rolled around exactly like every other Monday had for the past 11 years. But this time I was watching the circus from the comfort of my own home. I had converted a small breakfast nook into a makeshift home office during the lockdown, and it was serving me perfectly now. From my laptop screen, I watched as Chloe posted a boomerang on her Instagram story. It showed her twirling around in my old, carefully adjusted desk chair. The caption read, "Big girl job," followed by a string of sparkle emojis. There was a massive, blinding ring light set up in the background. A goddamn ring light in an operations office. I zoomed in on the video and noticed that she had already pinned some ridiculous motivational decal directly over my critical wall calendar. I highly doubted she even knew what a fiscal year was, let alone how to track one. Emails slowly started trickling into my inbox as the morning progressed. Nothing too crazy at first. Just the standard messages from various departments. Hey Richard, do you know where the vendor agreement from last month went? And Richard, can you check the server load? It seems a bit slow. These were the kind of messages that normally got answered before people even finished typing them. I ignored every single one of them. I was not being petty, I simply no longer worked there. At least, not in the way they expected me to. My physical body was not in the building, and my professional goodwill had left the premises the exact moment I saw Chloe's bright pink water bottle sitting exactly where my chipped coffee mug used to rest. While Daniel, the CEO, sent out his weekly team email bragging about his daughter's natural leadership aura and innovative perspective, I was opening a completely different spreadsheet. I labeled this document Plan B. Because while Daniel and Chloe were busy redecorating my legacy with ring lights and scented candles, I had already started constructing my permanent exit. I was doing it quietly, carefully, and methodically. My notebook, the one stuffed thick with years of scribbled panic buttons and color-coded contingency plans, sat open on my kitchen counter next to my laptop. The small black flash drive with no label was safely plugged into my personal machine. That drive held all the back doors, the automated scripts, and the custom data triggers. It was basically the digital equivalent of industrial duct tape that kept the company's financial limbs from falling off during the chaotic end of quarter close. Nobody at the company had ever bothered to ask where the magic lived. They were just happy that the massive data messes cleaned themselves up every single time. They had built an entire corporate ecosystem on my quiet efficiency. And now they were about to find out what happens when the air gets sucked entirely out of the room. That Monday, Chloe apparently rolled into the office like a homecoming queen entering a high school gymnasium. Her LinkedIn profile had been updated before she even sat down at my desk. Her new title was Operations Assistant and Digital Growth Specialist, which meant absolutely nothing in the context of our actual business. I received a text from a former coworker who had screenshotted her profile. The message simply read, "Your replacement is here," and she brought a mood board. Apparently, Chloe had brought a lot more than just a ring light. She brought a brightly colored desk mat, a framed quote about hustling, and a complete lack of operational knowledge. She spent her entire first morning filming a first day at work vlog, complete with slow-motion hallway struts and a latte montage. Meanwhile, the daily invoices that I usually cleared and processed by 9 a.m. sat completely untouched in the digital queue. The customer success dashboard began blinking red because one of our largest clients had flagged a critical delivery delay. The weekly calendar invite I used to send out every Monday morning for the operations sync never got created, but nobody panicked yet. They all figured I would handle it eventually, just like I always did. The thing was, I wasn't going to handle it. Not this time. I was not fixing any broken links. I was not correcting embarrassing email typos at midnight. I was not rewriting the sales deck behind the intern's back or ghostwriting Daniel's emails so he sounded like someone who possessed a basic vocabulary. I was entirely done. While Chloe was busy asking the IT department to help her hook up her personal playlist to the conference room speakers, I opened a new tab on my browser. I started filing the official LLC paperwork for a new business entity called Wren Strategies. Wren was my late mother's name. She had taught me how to read complex contracts when I was just a teenager, standing in the cramped kitchen of our tiny rental apartment. She used to tell me that the quiet people never get the credit, but they always get the leverage. I didn't fully understand what she meant back then, but I certainly understood it now. I wasn't planning a dramatic comeback to the company. I was planning to become their necessary replacement. I would offer the exact same services, but this time, as an independent consultant with an exorbitant price tag, I began building a comprehensive service menu. Operations triage, workflow audits, crisis cleanup, and emergency system restoration. It was everything I already did, but now untethered from clowns in tailored suits who handed away my office like a cheap party favor. My first inquiry came that very afternoon from a mid-sized vendor we frequently used for international freight logistics. They emailed me directly. "Hey Richard, heard you were consulting now. We are drowning in cross-border compliance issues. Are you available for a quick call?" I didn't answer right away. I let the email sit, watching as 3 more inquiries came in from various contacts I had cultivated over the years. By Tuesday morning, the real dimming began. For the first time in 11 years, the comprehensive executive weekly report did not arrive in the inboxes of the senior staff at exactly 8:15 a.m. There was no graph-laden PDF, no carefully color-coded bullet points summarizing performance metrics, vendor agreements, or customer escalations. There was just absolute silence where perfect order used to live. By 10:30 a.m., someone from the finance department messaged Chloe on the internal chat system. "Hey, do you know where the operations status report is? Richard usually sends it." Chloe reportedly replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. A full hour passed. By noon, the vice president of sales sent a much more pointed message. "I need that report before my big pitch at 1 p.m. Can someone just grab it off the shared drive?" The problem was that the report did not live on the shared drive. It never had. The data sources were linked manually, and the main spreadsheet was tied to rotating API tokens that only I knew how to refresh. I had written a custom script back in 2018 to prevent the entire dashboard from crashing every time our customer relationship management software hiccuped. Nobody knew that except me. I sat cross-legged on the floor of my living room, sipping lukewarm coffee, and let the desperate emails continue to roll in. They were beginning to realize that the scaffolding holding their company together was missing. By Thursday, the small cracks in the company's foundation were not just showing, they were echoing throughout the entire organization. It began with an urgent forward from a long-term logistics client. The subject line simply read, "Richard." The body of the message was plain and sharp. "We need Richard to confirm the electronic data interchange sequence immediately. No one else seems to understand how the manual override works. Is he still with you?" These longtime partners and supply chain veterans did not need obvious red flags to know something was wrong. They could hear the silence between the gears and knew the bearings were about to snap. Meanwhile, back at the corporate office, Daniel was busy hosting a company-wide livestream titled Vision 2026: Disruption and Digital Legacy. Chloe stood next to him like a pre-programmed mascot, nodding solemnly, while he dropped meaningless buzzwords like scalable synergy and transformational bandwidth. The only thing Chloe had successfully scaled so far was the height setting on the office espresso machine. Funny enough, Chloe kept telling everyone that I was shadowing her remotely. She spoke as if I were some kind of digital ghost peeking through the Wi-Fi connection, waiting for her to assign me a task. I did not bother to correct anyone. Let the ridiculous myth spread. By Friday, a massive European supplier flagged a critical shipment delay because no one had confirmed the unit count for customs clearance. I had built a conditional logic flow in our portal years ago to automatically alert the team when units dip below a risk threshold. I later found out Chloe had disabled it, claiming the constant alerts made her feel anxious. Now, the massive shipment was sitting in a warehouse, customs agents were breathing down their necks, and the vice president of procurement was typing in all caps. By Monday morning, the polite questions had curdled into catastrophic problems. A red flag compliance notice hit the main inbox of our top-tier client, the one with strict government contracts, airtight security standards, and very aggressive lawyers. The subject line screamed, "Urgent data transmission failure." The email contained a list of missed data packets, unverified timestamp mismatches, and one damning sentence. This protocol breach may constitute a severe violation of Appendix C, resulting in continued service suspension pending resolution. Appendix C was no joke. A violation of Appendix C meant massive federal fines, mandatory public disclosures, and highly probable litigation. For the last 8 years, I had handled that specific protocol manually twice a week. I logged in with dual-factor authentication, verified packet delivery against internal timestamps, and manually submitted secondary confirmations through a highly secure portal. Every Tuesday and Friday at 6 a.m. sharp. Nobody else knew how to do it. Nobody else even knew it was a requirement. At 8:17 a.m., the internal chain reaction exploded. Chloe sent a message to the angry client stating, "Thanks for the heads up. Our IT team is looking into it. Richard is still overseeing some of these back-end transitions remotely." The client did not respond kindly. They issued a formal cease processing order instead. That is when Daniel finally called my personal cell phone. I let it ring twice before answering. "Richard!" "Hey, small hiccup," Daniel said, his voice completely lacking its usual confident bark. It sounded tight and panicked. "We had a little mix-up with the compliance portal this morning. Total tech glitch. I was wondering if you had a second to jump in and take a look." I did not answer right away. I let the heavy silence stretch just long enough to make him incredibly uncomfortable. Then I spoke calmly. "I am unavailable." "Right, of course," Daniel coughed nervously. "I totally understand. I wouldn't normally ask, but this is that one weird thing you always handled. Super small, 5 minutes tops." "No," I replied, my voice steady and cold as ice. "I mean, I am unavailable in general. However, I do offer private remote consulting now if you are interested in hiring my services." I could hear the exact moment his reality shattered. He realized he was no longer speaking to an employee he could order around. "Oh, well, I guess we could figure something out. If you just shoot over your hourly rate." "I only work on retainer," I interrupted. 3-month minimum, strictly non-refundable." Daniel went completely quiet. He still thought I was bluffing. "Send me your info," he muttered defensively. "We will talk later." I hung up the phone. I never sent the information. Back at the corporate headquarters, Chloe was completely oblivious to the impending doom. She posted another ridiculous update to her social media, sitting cross-legged on the floor of my old office with 2 young interns. The caption read, "Teamwork makes the dream work. Brainstorming how to do big things," followed by a glowing brain emoji. Meanwhile, the actual company was rapidly unraveling. That same afternoon, the finance department was forced to pause the quarterly invoice to our largest vendor, the exact same partner who had flagged the Appendix C compliance issue. The partner aggressively refused to pay a single cent until the secure portal was fixed, the data re-verified, and most importantly, I was personally reinstated to oversee the account. But I was never going back. I was no longer the corporate janitor cleaning up their messes. I was unaffiliated, unapologetic, and completely unavailable. At exactly 9:12 a.m. on Wednesday, an email arrived from Sarah in Human Resources. It was written as if strict punctuality and corporate jargon could magically fix a sinking ship. The subject line read, "Return to office confirmation required." The body was painfully tone-deaf. "Hi, Richard. As part of our reintegration plan, we are finalizing the in-office schedules. Please confirm your exact return to office date so we can reserve space accordingly. Best, Sarah." I read the brief message 3 times before crafting my response. I did not include a polite greeting. I did not include a professional sign-off. I simply wrote, "There is no space to reserve." My office was reassigned. I hit send and immediately archived the thread. I knew Sarah would stare at my response as if it were written in an ancient, decipherable language. Human resources always struggled to comprehend situations that did not neatly fit into a predefined checkbox on their spreadsheet. But my message was a truth too stark and clean to be misunderstood. They gave my office away to an unqualified child. Now they could keep the empty room. Later that morning, Chloe missed her first critical, legally binding deadline. It was not a minor internal task. It was a contractual delivery checkpoint for a massive 3-client onboarding flow. It was a complex process that I used to execute flawlessly in my sleep, using nothing but a customized calendar reminder and a few automated scripts. Chloe missed the first delivery checkpoint by 2 full days. She missed the second checkpoint by 6 hours. The third checkpoint simply did not happen at all. When the furious client finally called the main office and demanded to know who their designated point of contact was, nobody had a straight answer. The client immediately terminated the contract. 12 years of careful partnership evaporated in a matter of minutes. 2 other major clients went completely quiet. They were not angry, they were just done. Invoices sat in limbo, emails went unread, and the customer relationship management software flagged them as high churn risks. The mood inside the company shifted dramatically. You could feel the heavy tension radiating through the screen during the weekly virtual meetings. There were painfully long pauses and forced, uncomfortable smiles. Chloe's voice climbed into a high-pitched, fake cheerful register, sounding like someone desperately trying to mask the smell of a burning building with a cheap air freshener. Daniel called an emergency alignment session. He sat beside his daughter, his shoulders squared and his lips pulled tight. He spouted the usual corporate nonsense used to placate a panicked staff. "We are undergoing a temporary strategic realignment. We are working through some minor operational kinks. We appreciate your patience during this exciting leadership transition." Nobody dared to ask where I was out loud, but the whispers had already started to spread like wildfire in private chat threads and direct messages. Most established companies can survive temporary disorganization. They can survive bad hires, terrible budget cuts, and even massive layoffs. But they absolutely cannot survive internal doubt. The entire staff now possessed that creeping, stomach-sawing realization that the quiet man who kept the lights on was actually the only structural pillar holding the roof up. By the following Wednesday, the wheels were not just wobbling, they were flying off the vehicle entirely. It started during the weekly operations sync. What used to be a tight, highly efficient 30-minute rhythm, under my direct supervision, had bloated into a chaotic hour-long mess of missed handoffs and terrifying confusion. I wasn't present on the call, of course, but 2 different former colleagues secretly recorded the audio and sent it to me. On the recording, I could hear Chloe completely losing her mind. "I do not know what you want me to do," she screamed, her voice cracking aggressively. "Nobody taught me how to do any of this. There is zero documentation, all the spreadsheets are completely broken, and half the vendors will only speak to Richard." The audio captured a loud slap as she threw her notebook violently onto the conference table, followed by a furious exhale. Then came the soft, shameful silence of a dozen adult professionals realizing they had allowed a spoiled child to steer their massive ship directly into a jagged reef. No one spoke for a full 8 seconds. The resulting fallout was catastrophic. Morale collapsed instantly. The compliance team quietly reached out to the legal department to ask if Chloe's explosive meltdown constituted a hostile work environment under federal guidelines. In the finance department, the dam finally burst. Without my automated scripts, running midnight reconciliations, they flagged over 16 massive invoices that had not been matched to delivery logs. 4 were entirely unpaid, 3 had been mistakenly sent to the wrong clients, and one massive bill had hilariously been sent back to our own company. The head of finance sent a direct, blunt message to Daniel. "We need to talk immediately. Something fundamental is entirely broken." Daniel panicked. He sent me a rapid string of desperate text messages. 8:41 a.m. "Richard, can we talk today? I think we all moved too fast. Let's reset this." 10:12 a.m. "We will find you a much better office. Just please come in. We can fix this together." 11:47 a.m. "This is getting incredibly serious. I am asking you for help as a friend." By noon, the desperate text completely stopped because I permanently blocked his number. I did not owe him a dramatic explanation. He already knew the truth. My silence was not a temporary vacation, it was a permanent corporate policy. While Daniel panicked, I signed my first official private client. It was one of the company's former partners. They reached out directly, asking if I still fix broken systems. I pitched them my Tier 2 consulting package, and they accepted it without blinking. The wire transfer hit my account the very next morning. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I celebrated with silence. The good kind of silence you earn when the noise of a toxic environment finally fades away. The absolute desperation finally forced Daniel out of his pristine glass tower. He showed up at my front door on a Friday afternoon, looking like a man who had just crawled out of a burning building. His normally perfect designer blazer was gone, replaced by a cheap windbreaker that featured a suspicious stain resembling spilled coffee. His eyes were red-rimmed. His skin had turned a sickly shade of gray, and his hair was entirely uncombed. I almost did not recognize the arrogant man who had casually tossed me aside just weeks prior. He rang the doorbell once, knocked aggressively, and then held his finger on the bell as if the continuous buzzing would somehow signal the severity of his internal emergency. I opened the door, holding my chipped ceramic mug in one hand, keeping my face completely devoid of any emotion. "Richard," Daniel gasped, sounding completely breathless. "Please, can I just talk to you for a minute?" I stepped aside without uttering a single word. It was not out of kindness, it was purely out of morbid curiosity. I wanted to see exactly how much a man could age in such a short amount of time. He walked into my home slowly, as if each step cost him a massive amount of personal pride. He sat cautiously on the edge of my living room couch, his hands visibly shaking. It was not nervous energy. It was the bone-deep exhaustion of a leader realizing that everything he had previously dismissed as trivial was actually the structural foundation of his entire empire. "We are drowning," Daniel finally whispered, staring at my floorboards. "The data systems are failing, the clients are leaving, and Chloe is just not ready for this level of responsibility. I thought she just needed some time to adjust, but she does not know where anything is located. Nobody in the building knows how any of the back-end architecture works anymore." I said absolutely nothing. I just stood there and let him talk. The words spilled out of him rapidly, as if he were frantically trying to purge every terrible decision he had made over the last month. "The vendor pipelines are completely jammed," he continued, his voice cracking. "The compliance team flagged 2 more massive federal issues. We have lost 4 of our largest clients in 5 days. The finance department is in an open state of revolt. I have furious board members calling my personal phone, asking me if this entire company was being run by a ghost. A ghost. That particular word almost made me smile. I was the ghost in the machine, and they had forcibly exorcised me without understanding the consequences." Daniel leaned forward, clasping his trembling hands together, his eyes pleading. "I know things got mismanaged. I know I handled the office situation poorly. But we need you, Richard. We desperately need you to come back and fix this." I calmly walked into my kitchen. I was not retreating. I was simply retrieving a pre-prepared document. It was a clean, professional white binder containing a single sheet of heavy stock paper. It was my official consulting rate sheet for Wren Strategies. I walked back into the living room and handed it to him, the way a silent waiter hands a massive bill to a customer after an expensive meal. Daniel opened the binder with shaking fingers. He stared at the 3-tiered options. He saw the strict 90-day minimums, the massive upfront retainer fees, and the absolute lack of any corporate discounts. I had handed him the pricing for the catastrophic system containment package. His face fell in slow motion. He looked at me as if he genuinely believed this was all a misunderstanding, as if he still possessed some sort of leverage in a game he had already lost. "Richard, this is—" Daniel stammered, his eyes wide with shock. "We cannot afford this." I nodded once, my expression completely neutral. "I know you can't." He stared at me, completely stunned. "Then why—" "You couldn't afford to lose me either," I said softly, delivering the words without a hint of anger, just cold, hard facts. "But you did." A heavy, suffocating silence settled between us. It was thick and absolutely final. Daniel carefully set the binder down on my coffee table, staring at it as if he expected the numbers to magically change. I did not offer him a cup of coffee. I did not offer him any sympathy. I provided absolutely no indication that these terms were negotiable, because they were not. Finally, he stood up slowly, looking heavily defeated. He picked up the folder, tucked it under his arm, and walked toward the door. "Just think about it," he muttered weakly, not even making eye contact. "Please." I opened the front door for him. He walked out and crossed my lawn to his expensive German luxury car. It looked utterly ridiculous now, like a tailored tuxedo draped over a drowning man. He sat behind the wheel for a long time before finally starting the engine and driving away. I closed the door, took a deep breath, and felt the immense satisfaction of knowing the empire I had quietly held together had finally collapsed under the immense weight of its own arrogance. 1 week later, the final illusion shattered. A sterile, sanitized email was sent out to the remaining corporate staff. The subject line read, "Organizational Restructuring Announcement." The body contained a lot of nonsense about streamlining and shifting priorities, but it all boiled down to a massive wave of immediate layoffs. 14 people lost their jobs. Meanwhile, Chloe completely vanished from the company. One day, her confident photo was proudly displayed on the team page, and the next day it was gone. The internal organizational chart showed a glaring blank space where her name used to be. The office she had taken from me, the room with the worn carpet and the perfect afternoon sunlight, sat completely dark and locked. Nobody wanted to touch it. While they were busy firing employees and praying to survive the quarter, I was on a conference call with their absolute biggest former client. They did not just want crisis support. They wanted a massive, long-term retainer. They wanted process audits, executive training, and complete back-end management. The contract came through that evening. It was a 7-figure deal. I signed it digitally while eating leftover Thai food at my kitchen table. When the final confirmation pinged, I opened my personal computer settings. I navigated to the accounts section and located the old corporate work email still sitting dormant on my machine. I clicked the delete button. The small loading wheel spun for a second and then it was gone forever. I never officially quit. I never handed in a formal resignation letter. I never packed a cardboard box and marched out of the building. I just stopped showing up, and when they casually gave my office away to a child, I gave them the absolute silence that destroyed them.